Tanashi stepped out of his car and looked up at the tall building of the High Court of Accra. The sun was hot, but the cameras were hotter. Reporters crowded the entrance, microphones stretched forward, people whispering his name like he was some kind of headline instead of a human being. And maybe he was. Because every news channel in the country was running the same shocking line. Father sues son for entire fortune. He adjusted his suit, calm on the outside, even though his chest felt tight. He never thought his own father would drag him here. Not like this. Not in front of the whole world. Patrick was already inside, standing near his lawyer, looking confident, almost proud. When the reporters asked him why he was suing his son, he didn't hesitate. He said it loudly, clearly, like he had practiced it. I built him. I deserve everything. The words spread through the crowd in seconds. Some people nodded. Some looked confused. Social media was already exploding. How does a father sue his own son? How do you claim someone's entire fortune just because you share blood? Tanashi didn't respond. He didn't argue. He just walked past the noise and into the courtroom. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a lawsuit. This was personal. And today, the whole country was about to watch a family tear itself apart in public. When people saw the headlines, they thought this was just about money. But for Tanashi, it was about something much older. Something that started when he was just a boy standing in the corner of a small living room, listening to his father's voice tear him down. Patrick never believed in him. Not once. If Tanashi brought home good grades, his father would shrug and say, "That's normal. Don't think you're special." If he talked about dreams, building apps, starting companies, working with computers, Patrick would laugh. You can't even fix a leaking tap. Useless. That word followed him everywhere. Useless. At family gatherings, Patrick would joke about him in front of uncles and cousins. This one, he won't survive in the real world. People would laugh. Tanashi would force a smile, but inside he was shrinking. When it was time for university applications, Tanashi worked hard. He stayed up late studying, used borrowed internet from neighbors, filled out forms by himself. He got accepted into a good program in computer science. It was the happiest day of his life. He ran home with the letter in his hand, heart racing. Patrick didn't even read it properly. "Who will pay for this?" he asked coldly. Tanashi thought it was a joke at first. It wasn't. His father said he wasn't wasting money on fantasies. He told him to get a basic job, earn small money, and stop dreaming too big. "People like us don't build empires," he said. "Know your level." They argued for weeks. The house became heavy with tension. Then one night, when Tanashi was 19, the fight exploded. Patrick shouted that he was tired of feeding an ungrateful failure. He told him if he wanted to chase big dreams, he could do it somewhere else. And just like that, Tanashi was outside with one suitcase. No savings. No support. No safety net. He slept on a friend's couch for months. Took small jobs. Fixing laptops, building simple websites, tutoring kids in math. During the day he worked. At night he taught himself coding through free online courses. Sometimes he was so tired his eyes burned, but he kept going. Every time he felt like giving up, he remembered that word. Useless. He promised himself he would never let that word define him. Years passed. One small freelance project turned into a bigger contract. One app turned into a startup. Investors slowly started to notice the quiet, focused young man who never talked about his past. He didn't post motivational quotes. He didn't brag. He just worked. His company grew. Then it expanded into other countries. His software solutions were used by banks, hospitals, and government offices. Suddenly, the same kind of people who once laughed at his dreams were calling him a genius. Today, Tanashi owns a tech empire worth hundreds of millions. Offices in different cities. Hundreds of employees. Awards. Interviews. Magazine covers. But none of it came from Patrick. No tuition money. No startup capital. No introductions. No emotional support. Just silence and rejection. So when the world now hears his father say, "I built him," they don't know the full story. They don't know about the 19-year-old boy standing on the street with a suitcase and tears he refused to let fall. They see a billionaire. They don't see the child who was told he would never be anything. And that's what makes this lawsuit hurt even more. The courtroom was packed. Every seat was taken. Journalists sat with notebooks ready. Bloggers typed live updates. Even strangers had come just to watch the drama. You could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy. Patrick's lawyer stood up slowly, adjusting his robe like he was about to perform on a stage. He looked confident, almost dramatic. He walked a few steps forward and faced the judge, then briefly glanced at the audience, making sure everyone was listening. "My lord," he began, his voice loud and steady, "this is not just a case about money. This is a case about sacrifice." The word sacrifice echoed in the room. He went on to talk about sleepless nights, about fathers who work hard, about parents who give up their own dreams for their children. He painted a picture of Patrick as a struggling father who had invested his life into raising his son. He said raising a child is the greatest investment of all, and that investment deserves a return. Some people in the audience nodded. A few murmured in agreement. The lawyer's voice grew stronger. Without Mr. Patrick, there would be no Tanashi. Without his guidance, his discipline, his roof, his name, this tech empire would not exist. A son's success, he said firmly, is built on a father's foundation. He then said something that made the room buzz even louder. "We are not asking for charity. We are asking for what is morally owed." Morally owed. The phrase hung in the air. Cameras zoomed in on Patrick's face. He looked serious, even emotional. At one point, he lowered his head as if holding back tears. It was a powerful performance. And the public loves a story about ungrateful children and sacrificing parents. But across the room, Tanashi didn't move. He sat straight in his chair, hands folded calmly in his lap. No anger on his face. No panic. No reaction. Just silence. He listened to every word, his eyes steady, almost unreadable. Inside, memories were flashing. The insults. The night he was thrown out. The empty bank account. The hunger. The doubt. But on the outside he was calm. His legal team occasionally leaned toward him, whispering small updates. He simply nodded. While the lawyer continued talking about love and sacrifice, Tanashi didn't interrupt. He didn't roll his eyes. He didn't shake his head. He just watched. Because he knew something the courtroom didn't know yet. And sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding the biggest truth. Outside the courtroom, Patrick looked calm, confident, like a man fighting for respect. But behind closed doors, the truth was very different. A week before the hearing, in a quiet private office, Patrick sat with his lawyer and two financial advisors. The door was shut. The tone was not emotional. It was desperate. Stacks of papers were spread across the table. Bank statements, loan agreements, credit card bills. The numbers were ugly. Millions owed. Properties mortgaged. Interest piling up. His investments had failed one after another. A luxury hotel project collapsed. A mining deal turned out to be a scam. Stocks he bragged about at dinner parties had crashed. For years, Patrick had been living big. Expensive cars. VIP events. Designer suits. He loved the image of success. Even when the money started shrinking, he refused to slow down. He kept borrowing to maintain the lifestyle. Kept pretending everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. One of the advisors finally said it clearly. "Sir, if you don't secure a major inflow of cash within 6 months, creditors will begin legal recovery." Legal recovery. That meant assets seized. Houses gone. Public embarrassment. Patrick leaned back in his chair, silent for a long time. Then he said something that changed everything. "What about my son?" The room went quiet. He didn't say it with pride. He didn't say it with love. He said it like someone mentioning an untouched savings account. "My son is worth hundreds of millions," he continued. "The public sees him as successful because of me. I raised him. That counts for something." That was the moment the lawsuit was born. Patrick, this wasn't betrayal. It was strategy. In his mind, Tanashi was not just his child. He was an insurance policy, backup plan, a financial rescue package waiting to be claimed. Later that evening, Patrick was overheard on the phone, pacing in his living room. His voice was low but sharp. "He can afford it," he said. "It's nothing to him. I'm his father. He owes me." There was no mention of reconciliation. No talk of fixing their broken relationship. No regret about the past. Just numbers, deadlines, pressure. The lawsuit wasn't about sacrifice. It wasn't about love. It wasn't even about pride. It was about survival. Patrick wasn't fighting for respect in that courtroom. He was fighting to save himself from financial collapse. And in his plan, his son wasn't family. He was the last asset left. When it was finally their turn, the room felt different. The energy shifted. Tinashe's lawyer, Advocate Lorato, stood up slowly. She didn't rush. She didn't raise her voice. She just walked to the front with a thick file in her hands and a calm look on her face. "My lord," she began gently, "we respect the idea of parental sacrifice. But today we are here to deal with facts." The word facts landed heavily. She opened the file and lifted the first document. "Let us start with education." Everyone leaned forward. She submitted official bank statements to the court. Highlighted lines. Clear dates. Clear amounts. These records show every tuition payment made to the university attended by Mr. Tinashe, she explained. As the court can see, the payments were made through student loans, part-time job income, and private bursaries. She paused, then added clearly, "There is no payment from Mr. Patrick." A soft murmur spread across the courtroom. Patrick shifted in his seat. Lorato continued. She presented emails from the university confirming that Tinashe had applied for financial aid independently. Letters showing he listed no parental support on his forms. Copies of lease agreements from the small apartment he rented at 19. Then came the next file. Now, regarding the startup capital for the tech company, she displayed early business registration documents, loan agreements under Tinashe's name alone, contracts from his first freelance clients, a small microfinance loan approval letter dated years ago. "No transfers," she said firmly. "No investments. No seed funding from Mr. Patrick. Not 1 cent. The courtroom grew quieter. Patrick's lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge raised a hand for silence. Lorato walked closer to the bench and placed a final document on the stand. "We also conducted a review of any documented financial support from Mr. Patrick to Mr. Tinashe after the age of 18. She looked up directly. "There is none. No monthly allowance. No business contribution. No signed agreements. No gifts declared. Nothing." The judge leaned back slightly and adjusted his glasses. For the first time since the hearing began, he raised an eyebrow. Patrick avoided eye contact. His earlier confidence seemed thinner now. The powerful story about sacrifice was starting to crack. Lorato didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. She simply closed the file and said one last sentence. "Respect is earned through action, not claimed through words." And the records show only one person built this empire. All eyes slowly turned toward Tinashe. And for the first time that day, the story in the room began to change. The courtroom was already tense after the financial records were exposed. You could feel people shifting in their seats, whispering quietly, trying to understand how the story had flipped so quickly. Patrick's confident posture was gone. His jaw was tight. His eyes stayed on the table. Then something unexpected happened. Tinashe slowly stood up. His lawyer looked at him for a second, then nodded. The judge gave him permission to speak. The entire room went silent. Even the journalists stopped typing. Tinashe adjusted his jacket, took a small breath, and looked straight ahead. His face was calm. Not angry. Not emotional. Just steady. "My lord," he began, his voice clear and controlled. "There is something important the court needs to know." You could hear a pin drop. He paused for a moment, not because he was nervous, but because the weight of what he was about to say was heavy. "I am not legally his son." For a second no one reacted. It was like the words didn't register. Then the courtroom froze. A woman in the back gasped. Someone dropped a pen. The reporters looked at each other, confused, then immediately started typing again. Patrick's head snapped up so fast it almost looked painful. "What?" his lawyer whispered. Tanashi didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on the judge. I discovered this years ago, he continued, voice still calm. But I never made it public because I wanted to protect my late mother's name. The air felt different now. Heavy. He explained that during a routine document process for his company's international expansion, certain legal records raised questions about his birth registration. That led him to request official copies of old documents. What he found didn't match the story he grew up with. The man suing me today, he said quietly, is not listed as my legal father in the corrected registry records. The judge leaned forward slightly. Patrick looked pale. Tanashi's voice never shook. So this is not just a case of a father demanding wealth from a son. This is a man claiming entitlement over someone he has no legal claim to. The silence was almost unbearable. All morning the case had been about sacrifice, about moral rights, about blood and family. And now, in one sentence, everything had changed. Patrick opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. For the first time that day he looked small. And as Tanashi slowly sat back down, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a lawsuit anymore. This was about to become a scandal. The room was still trying to process what Tanashi had just said when he stood up again. His voice was calm, but this time there was something deeper in it. Not anger, not revenge, just truth. My lord, he said softly, it's not only a legal matter. It's biological. You could feel people hold their breath. I found out years ago that Patrick is not my biological father. The words hit harder than before. A loud gasp came from the left side of the courtroom. Reporters leaned forward. Cameras zoomed in. Even the judge looked stunned. Tanashi continued carefully. He explained that after discovering inconsistencies in official documents, he privately did a DNA test. He didn't confront anyone at the time. He didn't go to the media. He didn't create drama. He kept it to himself. I confronted my mother before she passed, he said, and for the first time, his voice softened. She admitted the truth. He paused briefly. She said she kept the secret to protect me. She was afraid of what would happen if it came out. She believed keeping the peace was better than breaking the family. The courtroom was completely silent now. Tanashi explained that his mother had begged him not to expose it publicly while she was alive. She didn't want shame. She didn't want scandal. And he respected that. He carried the truth quietly for years, building his life without saying a word. Then his lawyer stepped forward and handed a sealed envelope to the court clerk. Inside were certified DNA test results from an accredited laboratory. Clear numbers. Clear conclusion. Probability of paternity. 0%. The clerk passed the documents to the judge. As Justice Mandlin Kosi reviewed the pages, his expression changed. He adjusted his glasses. Read the final line again. His face went pale. The courtroom felt frozen in time. Patrick, who had been sitting straight all morning, slowly leaned back in his chair. His hands trembled slightly. He didn't speak. He didn't argue. He didn't deny it. He just stared at the table. The powerful father who claimed, I built him, now had nothing to stand on. No legal bond. No biological connection. Just a lawsuit falling apart in front of the entire country. Tanashi sat down quietly. He didn't look victorious. He didn't look proud. If anything, he looked tired. Because sometimes the truth doesn't feel like winning. Sometimes it just feels heavy. Just when everyone thought the shock was over, Advocate Lorato slowly stood up again. Her face was serious. But there was something in her eyes that said this wasn't finished. My lord, she said quietly, there is one more thing. The courtroom was already shaken by the DNA results. People were whispering, reporters sending breaking news alerts. Patrick looked drained, defeated, but he still hadn't said a word. Lorato lifted another file. These are recovered emails, she continued, dated 15 years ago. Patrick's head slowly turned toward her. She began reading. The first email was from a private investigator. It referenced a DNA inquiry initiated by Patrick himself. The subject line was clear. The attachment mentioned paternity results. The conclusion was the same as the one presented today. Patrick was not the biological father. A wave of whispers spread across the room. Then Lorotto read Patrick's reply. So it's confirmed. He's not mine. The words felt cold, but what came next was worse. Another email, this time from Patrick to a close friend. I will not let this embarrass me. The boy will never know. I'll handle it. The courtroom gasped. Handle it. Lorotto's voice stayed steady. Despite discovering the truth 15 years ago, Mr. Patrick continued to present himself publicly as the father. He never informed the claimant. He never corrected official records. And more importantly, she paused slightly, he continued to emotionally abuse and reject him. People turned to look at Patrick. Memories started connecting. The insults, distance, the coldness. The night Tanashi was thrown out at 19, he knew the boy wasn't biologically his. And instead of stepping away with honesty, instead of protecting him like the mother tried to do, he chose silence and cruelty. One final email was displayed on the courtroom screen. Patrick writing to the same friend years later. If he becomes successful, maybe it won't matter whose blood he carries. The room erupted with gasps. It wasn't confusion anymore. It was betrayal. Patrick didn't deny it. He didn't stand up. He didn't defend himself. He just stared forward, eyes empty. For Tanashi, this wasn't just about money anymore. It wasn't even about DNA. It was about knowing that the man who called him useless, the man who threw him out, the man now demanding his fortune, had known the truth all along, and still chose to break him anyway. The courtroom felt heavy as everyone waited for the final decision. No one was whispering now. No one was checking their phones. All eyes were on the bench. Justice Mandlin Kosi adjusted his glasses and looked down at the stack of documents in front of him, the financial records, the DNA results, the emails from 15 years ago. He took a slow breath before speaking. This court has reviewed the evidence carefully, he began, his voice calm but firm. You could hear the tension in the silence. First, there is no legal proof of financial support provided by the claimant to the defendant after adulthood. No tuition payments. No business funding. No documented contributions. Patrick's shoulders dropped slightly. Second, the judge continued, the DNA evidence presented and verified by the court clearly establishes that the claimant is not the biological father of Mr. Tanashi. A ripple went through the room, even though everyone already knew. Third, the emails submitted show that the claimant was aware of this fact for over 15 years and chose to remain silent. Justice Nkosi paused and looked directly at Patrick. Therefore, this court finds that the claimant has no legal claim, no financial claim, and no biological claim over the defendant's wealth. The words were sharp, clear, final. This case is dismissed. A wave of reaction filled the courtroom. Some people sighed in relief, others looked stunned. Journalists rushed to send updates. The story that began as a father demanding his fortune had completely collapsed. But the judge wasn't finished. He leaned forward slightly, his tone changing. Parenthood, he said slowly, is not a business contract. It is not an investment portfolio waiting for returns. It is a responsibility built on honesty and care. The room was silent again. To weaponize the title of father for financial gain, he added firmly, is not only legally unfounded, it is morally disappointing. That line hit hard. Patrick didn't look up. He avoided eye contact with everyone. The judge, the audience, even his own lawyer. The confident man who once said, I built him, now looked small in his chair. Across the room, Tanashi remained calm. No smile. No celebration. Just quiet relief. Years of rejection. Years of silence. And now, in one ruling, the truth had been spoken out loud, not just by him, but by the court itself. The doors of the courthouse opened, and the noise outside was overwhelming. Cameras flashed nonstop. Reporters pushed forward, calling his name. Microphones were everywhere. The whole country had been waiting for this moment. Tanashi stepped out calmly, adjusting his jacket like it was just another normal day. But this was not normal. This was the end of something that had followed him his entire life. Mr. Tanashi, how do you feel? Do you forgive him? Do you have a message for your father? The questions came fast, loud, desperate. For a second he looked at the crowd. Not angry, not smiling, just steady. The same quiet strength he had carried through the entire trial. Then he leaned slightly toward the microphones and said one sentence. A father is someone who shows up, not someone who sues. That was it. No long speech. No insults. No drama. Just truth. The crowd went silent for half a heartbeat, and then the noise exploded again. Reporters repeated his words. Social media notifications started lighting up phones everywhere. Within minutes, that single sentence was trending. But Tanashi didn't stay to enjoy it. He turned and walked down the steps slowly, security clearing a path. His face showed peace more than victory, like he had finally put something heavy down. As he reached his car, his phone buzzed in his hand. Unknown number. He hesitated for a second, then opened the message. I have been watching the news. We need to talk. I'm in London. No name. But he understood. His biological father. For a moment he just stared at the screen. So many years. So many unanswered questions. Another chapter waiting to open. He locked his phone without replying and looked up at the sky. Today wasn't about finding a new father. It was about closing an old wound. He got into the car, the door shutting softly against the noise outside. He demanded my fortune. He forgot he never gave me his name.